must stop these crime scenes. They have only 72 hours to accomplish their objectives. The 4 specialists will exterminate the troops of DAC. They will never be defeated.
Let's go.
In the second half of the 1990s, the Neo Geo was struggling to keep up pace with the ever-increasing amount of 3D polygon games that had been flooding their way into arcades since about 1994. And so, the once mighty King of the Hill was now being made to look rather dated. This didn't mean that SNK were simply going to give up on its legendary console, and so game developers were pushing the boat out to make their games appeal to the masses, and actually, this period of the Neo Geo's life seen quite possibly some of the best games to ever grace the system. Shock Troopers Second Squad is a sort of sequel to the original Shock Troopers. It has some similarities given it is a run and gun game and it was developed by the same company, Saurus, but the game has no connection with the original. The gameplay system has been drastically changed because only 4 characters are selectable and there is no team mode from the first Shock Troopers. Even the characters themselves have been changed up, and they all look fairly unassuming. Leon looks like an accountant by day and a mercenary at night. So when he isn't helping people with a self-assessment form, he is blowing guys away. Angel looks a little like a Stormy Daniels inspired character. So when she isn't blowing guys away, she is blowing guys away. Other notable changes to the game are the graphics, which use pre-rendered backgrounds, and the action is more violent. A major new feature is an ability to ride some vehicles, as in the Metal Slug games. There has always been this question over whether it is any better than the original Shock Troopers, which I feel is unfair, as it's not really a true sequel to the original, but more of a spin-off. Put it this way, if the game had been given a title other than Shock Troopers, it would probably have been better received by critics. But for me, I think it's a tough decision to make. Which one is better? All I know is I do prefer Second Squad to the original Shock Troopers. Firstly, I think the game flows better without having to switch up characters during the level. And while that is a neat feature, it wasn't one I utilised a whole hell of a lot during gameplay. Second Squad feels more like your 1980s inspired up-the-screen shooter in the same vein of Commando, Mercs, or even Rambo on a Commodore 64, but way more action-packed and way more violent. The visuals in the game use some pre-rendered images for the backgrounds, and small, cutely drawn sprites for the main characters and enemies. and it's a mix that works well most of the time. I have always felt that pre-rendered images in games of this era had this artificial feeling to them, like they were not really there in a way. There has been something about them that you either love or hate, and it very much depends on the game. And in this game, it manages to do both. Some levels look great, and others just look bland. The vehicles are superbly detailed in the game, with the little boat on the dock level looking great with the spinning blades, and the armoured vehicles sharing the same levels of animation found in Viewpoint. It wouldn't really be a Neo Geo game without some kind of sprite scaling, and Shock Trooper's second squad does have a fair amount of that as well. The enemies seem to drop in from the sky and assemble en masse around you, and it looks great in my opinion. The explosions are not to my liking though. This kind of digitised explosion effect was popping up in sprite-based games more and more, and while it looks pretty decent, it's not an effect I have a great amount of fondness for, much like the pre-rendered backgrounds. They look a little artificial at times, but overall, the visuals for the game are good, and would probably have turned a few heads in the arcades when it was out. But the first time I discovered this game, it was on emulation, and this allowed me to enjoy the high quality soundtrack and effects without other distractions. And the sound in this game is brilliant. The gunshots and explosions are all what you would expect, but the sound as the enemies get shot, this grunt on impact is excellent. It does sound like they are wriggling in pain. There is a fair amount of sampled speech, which by this time was not so impressive, but it still adds to the atmosphere of the game. And the music is outrageously good in this game. I frickin' love the soundtrack to this game. It seems heavily inspired from the Euros dance scene of the 90s that was hugely popular in nightclubs in the UK of that time. And some of the level bosses have tunes that would fit in an acid house rave party. At times, you don't know if you should be reaching for the joystick or a glow stick. Should I play the game, or move around and make shapes with my hand while looking out of my face on drugs? A lot of Neo Geo games were using this kind of music style in games, and for a non-CD based machine, the tunes were all of a really high quality, and the fast pacing of the beats really did help with the immersion of the game, as the fighting was every bit as intense as the beats. What a truly outstanding combination. So does the music keep you playing the game? Well, yes it does. But so does the gameplay, as the game is a shed load of fun to play, and it's incredibly addictive. The simplistic nature of the gameplay really does allow it to appeal to a mass audience, and when almost every other popular arcade game of the time was a versus fighter, then this kind of game would have been a welcome change. No fancy complicated moves to learn or master, just pick it up and play. But saying that, the game does have this Ikari Warrior style 360 degree shooting, but without the twisting stick. You can lock your flow of fire in a certain direction by simply holding down the fire button, which only takes about 5 seconds to get used to. So it still qualifies as a pick up and play game in my opinion. As I mentioned, I first played this game on emulation and I was hooked on it pretty much instantly. My trips to the arcades had been becoming something of a rarity in the late 90s. I still ventured into them, but the selection of games on offer was changing away from video games to fruit machines and larger multiplayer cabinets like Ridge Racer 2 and Daytona USA. Games that cost more to play and had a higher return on them. So if it had not been for emulation, I may never have played this at all. But I did see it on second hand for the AES round about 2001. But I never bought it, and for 2 reasons. The first one being that Shock Troopers was a massively converted cartridge and was not officially released by SNK for the home console, and so any copy you would see would not be genuine. The second reason was my Neo Geo had been packed away, and in fact, the only console I had under my TV by this point was my PlayStation 2. And I just couldn't be bothered to fish out the Neo Geo every time I wanted to play a game, especially when I could play it in emulation without the hassle. But again, over time, you start to appreciate what it would mean to have a collection of classic games, and how good an addition Second Squad would have been to my rather small library of Neo Geo games. But, on the same token, I like my rather small collection of Neo Geo games, as I bought them when the machine was still active, and when I still actively played these games, and it was the memories I had from playing those games with mates. Each one of my games has a story behind it, a little memory or two of my carefree days, and also an appreciation of what it was like to play those games at the time when they were fresh on the scene. And this is why I don't purchase games now. And even if I did, I would only purchase games I used to own that I regretted trading in or selling. And this is something I think some collectors may not understand. But that was my look back at Shock Troopers Second Squad. If you like this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two below about your memories of Shock Troopers Second Squad. And a massive thank you to all of those who have subscribed and commented on my channel. Your feedback and support really does go a long way in helping the channel grow, and I do appreciate all of you. So it's a massive thank you from me. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.